Blow up your TV, throw away your paper, go to the country, build you a home.
It's bad, you know.
This is the second of two parts on Tertullian on television. What Tertullian wrote about the games and plays during his time can be easily applied to television, movies, and video games nowadays. In the last installment, we established that it seems that it is extremely difficult to find anything in the media that can be watched by a good Catholic. In fact, television is harmful for our spirituality. In this installment, we'll also discuss what St. John of the Cross had to write about desires for these types of things. Tertullian wrote, "If we try to keep our gullet and belly free from poisons, how much more our nobler parts, our eyes and ears, should we guard from the pleasures of idol sacrifice, pleasures not of gut and digestion, but of spirit, soul, and suggestion." And in this installment, we'll establish that watching television, movies, playing video games is equivalent to idol sacrifice. Tertullian continues, "The whole world is filled with Satan and his angels. Yet not because we are in the world do we fall from God, but only if in some way we meddle with the sins of the world. Thus, if as a sacrificer and a worshipper I entered into the temple of Serapis, I shall fall from God, just as I should if I was a spectator in a circus or a theater. And this is proved through Scripture. He that toucheth pitch shall be defiled with it. Just as there is a lust for money, a lust for dignity, for greed, for impurity, for vainglory, so there's a lust for pleasure. The shows are that sort of pleasure. So is the pleasure that people get from television, movies, and video games a bad thing? St. John of the Cross tells us that desires for things like television, movies, and video games harm the soul by making it lukewarm and weak, so that it has no strength to follow after virtue or to persevere therein. Scripture tells us that thou shalt love the Lord thy God with thy whole heart, with thy whole soul, with thy whole mind, and with thy whole strength. This is the first commandment. All things of the world are created things. Things that are found in nature were created by God. But things like televisions, movies, and video games are even lower than those created things, since they were created by man, who was in turn created by God. So if we spend more time on these creatures than we do in prayer to God, are we offending God? When it offends God, the created thing ceases to be his. And when it ceases to be his, it offends him. Man himself, the creator of every kind of guilt, is not only the work of God, but also of his likeness. And yet, in body and spirit, he falls away from his creator. For we did not receive eyes for lust, nor the tongue for evil speech, nor the ears to listen to evil speech, nor the gullet for the sin of greed, nor the belly to be the gullet's partner, organs of sex for shameless excess, or hands for violence. Does a thing befit a servant of God which does not please his master? St. John of the Cross tells us that the soul that is hot with desire for any creature draws forth foulness from it through the heat of its desire and is stained by it. And there is more difference between the soul and other corporeal creatures than between a liquid that is highly clarified and mud that is most foul. Do you think that seated where there is nothing of God, such as in a theater, a man will at that moment turn his thoughts to God? With his mind on the actors, he will learn purity? No. St. John of the Cross tells us that desires for creatures weaken the soul in virtue and make it lukewarm. What sort of conduct is it to go from the assembly of God to the assembly of the devil, from sky to sty, as the proverb has it? Those hands you have uplifted to God, to tire them out clapping for an actor? St. John tells us that desires blind and darken the soul. Tertullian adds, the supreme offense in God's eyes is idolatry. So when we spend more time on something like television than we do in prayer, it is idolatry. And this is proven by Scripture. I am the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not have any strange gods before me. Thou shalt not adore them nor serve them. I am the Lord thy God, mighty and jealous. When we are baptized, we renounce the devil, his pomp, and his angels. So if it shall be established that the whole of the public shows is idolatry, pure and simple, we have an indubitable decision laid down for us in advance, that our renunciation made in baptism touches on the public shows too, since they, being idolatry, belong to the devil, his pomp, and his angels. St. John of the Cross tells us that desires bring no good to the soul, but rather take from it that which it has. And if the desires are not mortified, they will not cease until they have wrought in that which the children of a viper are said to work in their mother, who, as they are growing within her womb, consume her and kill her, and they themselves remain alive at their mother's cost. Just so the desires that are not mortified grow to such a point that they kill the soul in respect to God, because the soul has not killed them first, and they alone will live in the soul. We have now established the charge of idolatry enough to warrant our abstaining from the shows. But let us go a step further and look at it another way, chiefly for the benefit of those who feel that such abstention is not definitely prescribed, as if not enough were said about the shows when the lusts of the world are condemned. St. John of the Cross says, "For although that it is true that the unruly soul in its natural being is as perfect as when God created it, yet when it starts chasing after creatures, it is vile, abominable, foul, black, and full of all the evils that are being here described. For a single unruly desire, although there be in it no matter of mortal sins, suffices to bring a soul into such bondage, foulness, and vileness that it can in no way come to accord with God in union. As for the Christian, God forbid he should need further teaching to hate this spectacle." Tertullian adds, "What is to save such people from demonic possession? For we have in fact the case, and the Lord is witness, that a woman went to the theater and returned devil-possessed. So, when the unclean spirit was being exorcised, and was pressed with the accusation that he had dared to enter into a woman who believed, he responded, 'And I was right too,' he said boldly, 'for I found her on my own ground.'" How many other proofs indeed can be drawn from those who by communion with the devil in the shows have fallen from the Lord? For no man can serve two masters. St. John of the Cross says, "A mirror that is clouded over cannot receive within itself a clear image, or as water defiled by mud reflects not the visage of the one that looks therein, even as the soul that is clouded by the desires is darkened by the understanding, and allows neither the sun of natural reason nor that of the supernatural wisdom of God to shine upon it and illumine it clearly." It is our duty to hate these assemblies of the heathen. Think well over it, what it means for you in heaven. Do you doubt but that at this very moment, when the devil is raging in his assembly, all the angels look forth from heaven and mark down, man by man, how this one has spoken blasphemy, and that one has listened, that one has lent his tongue, the other his ears, to the devil against God? Let the devil's own guests batten on his sweets. Our feast, the marriage festival, is not yet. We cannot take our place at the table with them because they are not with us. Now they are happy, and we are afflicted. The world says, "We will rejoice. You will be sad." You are dainty, O Christian, if you long for pleasure in this world as well as the other. A bit of a fool in the bargain, too, if you even think that is pleasure. As we said in a prior installment, television makes us stupider, not only because of its vapid content, but as St. John of the Cross explains, when the soul is darkened in the understanding, it is benumbed also in the will, and the memory becomes dull and disordered in its operation. For as these faculties in their operation depend on the understanding, it is clear that when the understanding is impeded, they will become disordered and troubled. If you think we are to pass this interval of life here in delights, why are you so ungrateful as to not find enough of the great pleasures, the many pleasures given to you by God, and not recognize them? What has more joy in it than reconciliation with God, the Father and Lord, than the revelation of truth, the recognition of error, and the forgiveness of all the great sins of the past? What greater pleasure is there than disdain for pleasure, than contempt of the whole world, than true liberty, than a clean conscience, than life sufficient, than absence of all fear of death? If the literature of the stage delights you, we have sufficiency of books, of poems, of aphorisms, sufficiency of songs and voices, not fiction. Those of ours are truth, not artifice of simplicity. Here they are, things of no small account and plenty of them. See impurity thrown out by chastity, perfidy slain by faith, cruelty crushed by pity, impudence thrown into the shade by modesty. And such are the trials we face, and in them we are crowned. If your goal is to go to heaven, then television is your enemy. At the very least, it is a near occasion of sin. If our eyes linger on a scantily clad woman, it becomes outright sinful. However, just the advertisements on television are filled with that sort of thing. It really is unavoidable if we watch television. All this harm and more is done to the beauty of the soul by its unruly desires for the things of the world. So much so that, if we set out to speak of the foul and vile appearance that the desires can give the soul, We shall find nothing, however, except the cobwebs and worms it might be, not even the corruption of a dead body, nor anything else that is impure and vile, nor is there anything that can exist that can be imagined in this life to which we could compare it. Well, thank you for watching this installment. We'll be back again in about a week with another one, but in the meantime, please check out my Facebook page, which is linked down below. Every day I post additional content that you won't see on this YouTube channel, and please pray for the church.
Teenage wasteland.